She waited 2 years. Then she sent 4 messages. I don't know if this account still works, but I'm sorry. For the past, I can't contact you. I don't know if you're still alive, but I truly apologize. That was it. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the damage she had allowed to happen. Just 4 lines dropped into his inbox 2 years to the exact day after his entire life collapsed, while she had said nothing. He had lost every friend he had, lost his reputation, lost his sense of himself. He had been hurting himself in the dark, alone, while everyone around him called him a predator. And now, 2 years later, she was sorry. But here's the brutal truth that nobody warns you about. Vindication that arrives after the wreckage doesn't rebuild what was destroyed. It just confirms what you always knew. This is the story of one night, a lie that spread through his entire world like fire, and a reckoning that took 730 days to arrive. Let me take you back to where this all started. He was 18 years old. By his own account, and, as we'll eventually see by the account of everyone involved, a decent person trying to get through a hard night. He was at a party, carrying some private sadness the way young people do, leaning on friends and drinks and the kind of noise that lets you forget. There was a girl there, not his girlfriend, not anyone he was pursuing. She was a friend of his best friend, and as the night wore on, she got drunk. Not slightly tipsy, genuinely, dangerously drunk. She passed out, she was sick. And as the party wound down and people drifted home, he noticed something that most people in his position would have simply walked past. She was leaving alone. A taxi app on her phone, no one with her, no one checking on her. In his own impaired, emotional state, he made a choice that felt obvious at the time. He decided to make sure she got home safely. He told his best friend he'd handle it. He'd see her to her door, no big deal. He had no idea that single act of looking out for someone would become the thing that destroyed him. He rode with her in the taxi, not because he had any agenda, but because he genuinely believed a drunk girl shouldn't travel alone at 2 in the morning. His plan was clean and simple. See her to her door, catch a motorcycle taxi home, done. Where he's from, Southeast Asia, motorcycle taxi apps are how you get around cheap, especially late at night when regular fares don't make sense on a thin wallet. But when they arrived at her address, his plan fell apart completely. No motorcycle drivers were accepting requests. The area was outside the city center. It was the middle of the night. He had roughly $20 on him, not enough for a regular taxi back, not enough for a hotel room without making that motorcycle connection first. He was carrying a backpack with everything valuable he owned. And he wasn't in a state to wander around an unfamiliar area at that hour, for reasons that, given his own past, made being alone outside feel genuinely threatening, so he asked if he could crash at her place. She said okay. He stepped through that door thinking it was a minor inconvenience. He had no idea what was waiting on the other side of that night. She was living with strict parents and had snuck out that night, which meant her bedroom was the only room available. A tiny space, barely bigger than a closet. He laid down. He put deliberate distance between them, face to the ceiling, eyes up, trying to get through the night without complications. He wasn't naive. He knew she had someone in her life. He had zero intention of letting anything happen. But then she started moving toward him, her head on his shoulder, her hand finding his, and when she placed his hand on her thigh, he removed it immediately and told her directly, "I don't think we should do this." "Aren't you with someone?" She said it was casual, not serious, not cheating, and then she moved closer. Things escalated. At one point he pulled back and said clearly that they should stop. She said no, it's okay, and she came back. In an impaired state he hadn't chosen, in a situation he had never planned for. He stopped pushing back. He would spend the next 2 years paying for that decision, not because he forced anything, but because the morning had its own plans for how this story was going to be told. He woke up with dread already sitting in his chest before he'd even opened his eyes. You know that specific feeling when your body understands what your brain hasn't caught up to yet. She kicked him out that morning without ceremony. No warmth, no conversation. Just time to go. He walked home carrying the full weight of it, and when he'd processed enough to speak, he did the thing that felt like the right move. He told his best friend. His best friend, who was also this girl's friend, he tried to explain the truth. That things had been mutual, that she had initiated, that she had kept reassuring him throughout, that at one point he had actually stopped and she had pulled him back. His best friend didn't want to hear it. As it turned out, this girl had a pattern, a habit of doing things while drunk and then going silent after, letting the weight fall on someone else. His best friend knew this pattern, and she had decided that this time, somebody was going to be held responsible. The problem was she didn't choose the person who had started it. She chose him, without questions, without waiting. She just decided, and then she started talking. Before he could say a single word in his own defense, the story was already everywhere. Not just out, it was through his entire social world, fast and final. And the narrative had been written for him, clean and damning. He had seen an opportunity with a vulnerable girl, followed her home with intent, and taken advantage of her. That was the version people got. Not the truth, where he had been trying to make sure she got home safely. Not the truth, where she had initiated every moment of contact. Not the truth, where he had literally stopped at one point and told her they should stop. None of that was in the story people were sharing. Because the girl herself, afraid of being seen as a cheater, unwilling to have her own choices examined, stayed completely silent. She unfollowed everyone connected to that night and disappeared. And in her silence, the accusation filled every empty space and hardened into fact. He was blocked before he could respond. He was labeled before anyone asked for his side. Ask yourself this: what do you do when the only person who could clear your name simply chooses not to? Let's be specific about what he lost, because losing everything is too easy a phrase for what actually happened to this kid. He lost his closest friends, not just one or two, all of them. Some refused to hear his side of it at all. Others heard it, nodded, stayed quiet, and still sided publicly against him because the social cost of standing next to him was too high. He lost his reputation inside his school, his community, the only social world that existed to him, which, when you are 18 years old, is your entire universe. He lost his dignity. He lost his belief that he had done something right. And in the darkest stretch of those 2 years, he started hurting himself. Alone. Branded as something he wasn't. No support system. No mechanism to clear his name. Falling apart in private while the false story remained unchallenged in public. And the girl who knew the actual truth, the one person who could have ended all of it with a single honest statement, blocked him and moved on. He was left to live inside a lie he hadn't told, for 2 full years, with no end visible anywhere on the horizon. 2 years is a long time. Long enough for wounds to calcify into scars. Long enough to build a new version of yourself from the wreckage of who you used to be. He had moved forward, or tried to. His old Instagram account had sat deactivated the entire time, a digital tombstone for the person he was before that night. And then, for whatever reason, nostalgia, or impulse, or maybe just the quiet recognition that enough time had finally passed, he turned it back on. The universe, it turns out, had been waiting. 4 messages, sitting there unread from her account. Sent 2 years to the exact date. Think about what that means for a moment. She had been holding this for 730 days. Whatever guilt she was carrying, she'd been sitting with it long enough to know the precise anniversary. Long enough that she genuinely didn't know if he was still alive to receive what she'd written. I don't know if you're still alive. That line. Of everything in those 4 messages, that line. Because that is what 2 years of isolation and destruction and hurting yourself in silence can look like to the person who caused it and then looked away. He sat with those 4 messages, and the emotions didn't arrive in any clean order. First came something that felt like relief. After 2 years of absolute nothing, here was something. Some trace of proof that what he remembered was real. That he hadn't invented the version of events that had lived, unconfirmed, in his head for 730 days. Then came the rage, years of it, compressed and pressurized and waiting. He thought about every friend who had left. Every day he'd spent labeled as a predator for trying to do the right thing. Every night he'd spent alone while she stayed silent in public. And then, and this is the part he didn't expect, the sadness arrived and swallowed everything else. Because he realized, holding that proof in his hands, that it didn't actually fix anything. The friends weren't coming back. The reputation wasn't being restored. Nobody who had called him a monster was going to see 4 vague messages on a deactivated account and reverse their verdict. He typed one question back to her. What specifically are you apologizing for? He sent it. He waited. She left him on delivered. Read receipt. Then silence. The same silence that had always been her answer. No response ever came. Just delivered. Read. Silence. And in that silence, he found something close to an answer, not the one he'd hoped for, but a real one. Vindication, when it finally arrives, rarely looks like the movies. There's no courtroom, no public correction, no friend who calls to say, I should have believed you. What he got was 4 carefully vague messages and a read receipt from the person who had watched his world collapse and chosen to stay quiet. No names, No admission, just "I'm sorry" for the past. And yet it still mattered, not because it erased anything. It didn't, but because it confirmed in writing from the only source that ever counted that what he remembered was true. He had tried to do the right thing that night. He had been failed spectacularly by people who chose a clean narrative over a complicated truth. And even the person at the center of it all, 2 years later, carrying it alone, knew it. She just couldn't bring herself to say so in any way that might cost her something. Cold karma doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a message nobody else will ever see, from someone who couldn't sleep anymore. What stays with me about this story isn't just the injustice, though it's real. It isn't just the betrayal, though that cuts deep. It's the specific loneliness of being 18 years old, doing the decent thing, and watching every person you trusted choose a comfortable lie over a complicated truth. And the question at the center of it, the one nobody answered for him, is this: what do you actually do with an apology that comes after the damage? There's no clean resolution here. No public clearing of his name. No satisfying final scene. Just a young man who survived something that would have ended many people, who found 4 words of confirmation buried in an old inbox, and who now has to decide what he does with that. Cold karma doesn't always detonate like a bomb. Sometimes it's just 4 quiet messages on a dormant account, sent 2 years too late, from someone who couldn't carry the weight of what they'd allowed anymore. The damage was real. The truth was real. And now, finally, both of those things exist in the same place at the same time. If this story stayed with you, drop a like and subscribe. We find stories like this every single day, and every one of them deserves to be heard.